When I was going through my phase of robotic affirming, you could not have told me that I was detaching. The way that I saw robotic affirmations was very much like you just say a string of words to saturate your subconscious mind and basically persist over and over in that string of words until it manifests in physical reality. It wasn't until like years later that I went back and started studying manifesting from a different perspective and with the goal in mind of trying to unify all of these different processes that I had practiced up until this point. Because I at that time I really wanted a system that unified all of the information that I had learned up until that point and also included explanations for all of the different experiences I had with manifesting. Now, when I first stumbled upon this idea or this concept of manifesting, I never really resonated with the word detachment. There was something about it that my mind, my linear mind specifically, did not like. And so naturally, what ended up happening was I gravitated towards processes that let me keep my manifestation in my imagination, meaning that I didn't necessarily need to want something and then somehow find a way to like not want it anymore. Or at least that's how my brain interpreted detachment up until that point. It wasn't until I went back and reanalyzed all of the different processes that I had practiced and also went back and reanalyzed all of my past manifestation experiences and specifically looking at all of my successful manifestations and my unsuccessful manifestations, did I realize that when I was practicing robotic affirming, even though I didn't really understand it at the time, I actually was practicing a form of detachment with all of the manifestations where I got my manifestation through robotic affirming. If you watched my spectrum of detachment video, I actually briefly talk about this in this video, and I want to use today's video as a form of elaborating on the point that I made in that particular video, where I talk about finding levels of security within the manifestation process itself. Now, one of the situations that can sometimes arise when it comes to manifesting something is our own insecurity in our ability to manifest something. And so, as I mentioned in that video, the spectrum of detachment video, when it comes to this level of insecurity, one of the easiest ways to turn your knob from insecure to secure is actually by reminding yourself of what you already know to be true about the manifestation process that you are practicing. Now, although I personally don't use robotic affirming that much anymore, I don't think it's a bad process or a bad way of going about manifesting something, especially if this particular form of manifesting resonates for you. Because I know looking back for me personally, it very much served me at that point in my life. But in today's video, I want to offer you 3 particular ways of going about finding that level of security with robotic affirmations, especially if you feel like you've been affirming for a long time and your manifestation still has not come. The reason why it probably hasn't manifested yet in physical reality is probably because your detachment knob is on a high level of insecurity. And in today's video, I want to teach you how to turn that level of insecurity to security with this particular process itself. My first tip when it comes to turning your security knob from highly insecure to secure when using robotic affirming is actually something that I mentioned in my spectrum of detachment video, which is finding security in your ability to persist in that string of words no matter what happens in physical reality. For me personally, I used this level of security without really knowing it when I was manifesting $1,000 per day. I remember telling myself that no matter what happens in my physical reality, I'm going to persist that I make $1,000 per day no matter what happens, no matter what my bank account says. I'm going to be okay with whatever happens in physical reality, but I'm going to continually persist and saturate my subconscious mind with this reality of I make $1,000 per day. I don't have to feel anything. I just have to say a string of words until it manifests. And because I found security in my ability to persist no matter what happened in my current physical reality, I actually was practicing a form of detachment because I didn't need my 3D reality to look a certain way in order for me to keep persisting in this reality of already having $1,000 per day or already making $1,000 per day. Now, one thing I will say is that this particular experience, I felt like I was fighting myself like every single day that I woke up and affirmed, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day over and over again. And when I look back, I realized that I was basically just like fighting myself. But even in that highly unfavorable state of being where I felt like I was fighting myself or felt like I was constantly like working towards getting $1,000 per day by affirming nonstop, that I made $1,000 per day, even then, even when I was in a highly unfavorable state of being, I still manifested that reality. And so when I look back at this experience, I credit the success to my ability to persist no matter what. I found a way to be okay with my current reality, even though I didn't like it, and even though I was actually kind of like driving with my foot on the brake a little bit. But even then, I could still persist and say those string of words no matter what was happening in my 3D reality and no matter how I reacted to what was happening in my 3D reality. So that's my first recommendation is find your level of security in your ability to persist no matter what happens in your physical reality. Finding your security in that piece of information will allow you to stop putting the pressure on your 3D reality to look a certain way in order for you to believe and continue to persist in already having what it is that you want. Now, the second way that I unknowingly practiced detachment with robotic affirming was actually by accidentally discovering a different way of affirming. So as we know, when it comes to affirmations or practicing robotic affirming, we know that we're saying a string of words over and over again until it manifests in physical reality. But one thing that I realized when it came to practicing affirming is there's actually different ways that you can affirm in your mind or out loud. And more specifically, there's a different tone of voice that you can use and simulate when you say a string of words. In other words, it's not necessarily what you're saying, but it's also how you're saying it. So what I caught on to earlier on was this art of affirming to neutrality rather than panic affirming. My most popular video up until the time of this video's recording talks about how a more productive way to go about robotic affirming is actually affirming to neutrality. And the beautiful thing about affirming to neutrality is that you actually have control over how you say a string of words, whether in your mind or out loud. For example, affirming to neutrality would look something like this. I am so wealthy. How did I get so freaking wealthy? I have so much money coming in from like all of these places. Like, oh my gosh, why does money love me so much? Versus, I am so wealthy. I am so wealthy. I am so wealthy. I am so wealthy. Money loves me. Money loves me. Like, notice a different tone of voice in both of those. One of them is in an extremely neutral, almost obvious and nonchalant tone of voice. The other one's panic affirming. And I found very high levels of security with my ability to simulate neutrality through the string of words. In fact, the more neutral and nonchalant that I said the words, the higher levels of security I felt with not only my ability to manifest the thing that I wanted, but I also experienced high levels of security with the manifestation process itself. I found myself not spiraling anymore with the string of words that I was using to, again, saturate my subconscious mind, which can sometimes happen when you do panic affirming. One manifestation where I really practiced this art of affirming to neutrality is actually another video that I created about healing a suspicious mole on my arm, where I basically used robotic affirming to heal very spontaneously and naturally a very suspicious looking mole. I had a lot of fear with this one just because the mole looked suspicious and it had something to do with my health. So in a way, I was coming up against a lot of fear with this particular manifestation as well. But the way that I was able to dismiss the fear was in the process of affirming to neutrality and simulating that state of being of neutrality every single time I affirmed the end result of that particular manifestation. And I did create a safety net for myself in physical reality. Like I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the doctor if like something doesn't change within a month. But my point with this particular manifestation is I was able to persist in a more productive way with robotic affirming through the art of persisting in a neutral tone of voice every single time I would say this affirmation. And I didn't even say this affirmation out loud. This was all in the privacy of my own mind. My point is that you can change your tone of voice, yes, vocally out loud, but you can also change your tone of voice in your inner world as well. So that's the second way that I was able to detach and find security with my ability to manifest something through robotic affirming. The third thing that really helped me detach and find high levels of security with the process of robotic affirming was actually reminding myself of the process or of this particular model of manifesting and the reason why it was going to manifest in physical reality if I just did this step-by-step process of affirming until it manifested in my physical reality. And what I mean by this is that when it comes to any type of manifestation process or method, when you really take a step back and look at all these different processes, you'll notice that they're all just permission slips. They're all different ways of practicing taking your focus off of the thing you don't prefer and onto the thing you do prefer, while simultaneously elevating elevating your own belief structures in how you perceive reality to be working. So when it came to robotic affirming specifically, the model of this manifestation method is very much based off of this idea of saturating your subconscious mind, which can be considered a very cerebral process. So the idea behind this method is you don't necessarily need to believe your manifestation. You don't need to believe what you're saying. You don't need to feel it real. You don't need to do any of the stuff. All you have to do is change your thought and repeat that thought over and over again until it manifests. That piece of information right there, yes, it is similar to finding security in your ability to persist no matter what, but with this particular level of security, it's more about reminding yourself why you're saying the string of words in the first place. You're doing it to saturate your subconscious mind, or at least from that perspective, that's how it's manifesting in physical reality. These three pieces of information were, like I said, at the time, I didn't realize that I was actually practicing a form of detachment. But looking back, these three pieces of information were the very things that gave me the feeling of security in my ability to manifest what I wanted through the process of robotic affirming. It was simply finding higher levels of security in my ability to manifest no matter what happened in physical reality, finding higher levels of security with how I actually said the affirmation so I didn't accidentally start like spiraling or panic affirming with the same string of words that I was trying to saturate my subconscious mind with, and also with just the information and the model layout of using robotic affirming to manifest in physical reality. The point I want to make with this video is that no matter what process you use, your ability to find higher levels of security is going to be the very thing that helps you feel like you can release your old reality and embrace your new reality. And so no matter how you see manifesting, you can find high levels of security in new belief structures, in new ways of going about manifesting that resonate with you specifically. And my aim for this video is just to provide other ways of elevating that level of security with robotic affirmations itself, because I know it's a very popular way of manifesting. And I think if you understand it from a certain perspective, you can see results a lot more effectively if you start finding higher levels of security with your ability to manifest in this way. And actually, as a bonus tip for practicing detachment with robotic affirming, another way that you can practice higher levels of security with this process is actually by using blanket statements in a very repetitive and neutral way in the face of a piece of contrast in your physical reality. With the idea of saying this string of words, or with the idea of saying this blanket statement as a way of self-soothing and maintaining a stable state of being. I've noticed that the faster and more neutral you say the string of words or the blanket statement, the more it self-soothes you. And actually, after reading the book Autosuggestion by Emil Quay, that's when it really started to make sense, because in that book he talks about autosuggestion, which is actually just a form of robotic affirming, and the art of using autosuggestion as a form of self-hypnosis. When you say a string of words in a very fast, neutral, chronic way, what it does to your state of being is it chills you out. So if you're triggered by something in your physical reality, one of the best ways to maintain a stable state of being so you don't spiral is by saying a blanket statement in that repetitive and neutral fashion. So for example, I'll give you an example of how I've used this before in my personal life. Actually, I'll give you two examples. One of them I actually shared already in my first conscious parallel reality story, where I basically manifested a different timeline with my car. But in that particular story, there was a situation where I had to drive my car from my house to the dealership. And quite frankly, I should not have been driving that car. In fact, the mechanic I had visited like a couple days earlier told me not to, but I did. Don't judge me, but I was. The reason why I bring this up is because when I was driving it to the dealership and it was still making the grinding noise, I was in a very kind of scared, fear-based state of being for several reasons. First, I was driving a car that I probably shouldn't have been driving on the road. And so I was just naturally nervous with thinking that something horrible was going to go wrong because it was making that noise as I was driving. It was like putting me on edge. And I was also apprehensive about the bill. Like it sounded like a very expensive thing to fix, and I just didn't want to have to deal with it. I didn't want to have to pay for it. But as I'm sitting there with like these nerves as I'm driving the car to the dealership, I just remember telling myself over and over again, that was such an easy fix. 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 And it got me from my house to the dealership in one piece. It kept me calm and in control of my state of awareness and my state of being more specifically, even though I was still experiencing fear and nerves driving this car to the dealership. Another example of how I've practiced using robotic affirming as a form of self-soothing in the face of contrast in my physical reality was actually quite recently. So, as you guys know, I do Faceless YouTube, and I actually have an LLC, like a business with Faceless YouTube. And so, when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I was very much unaware of all of the different fees and things that I needed to do in order to run and maintain an LLC. And so, what I ended up creating in my physical reality was this fear of my mailbox, which sounds kind of weird. But one thing that started happening earlier on in this journey was getting surprise bills for having an LLC, or surprise reasons that I needed to pay a fee for taxes or something like that. Like, it was just because I didn't know what I didn't know. But what ended up happening was I started creating by accident this fear-based response to my mailbox, where I started to become afraid of going to my mailbox being like, what the heck do I not know today? Like, what do I need to pay that I didn't know that I needed to pay earlier? Like, for me personally, I don't mind paying bills, but I don't like the surprise element of having to pay an unknown bill that I was not aware of prior. And so it was just like a learning process for me. And I accidentally created a fear-based response to my mailbox to the point where I actually started avoiding my mailbox. And so when I became aware of the fact that I was having like a fear-based response every single time I was going to just my mailbox, I was like, whoa, we need to change the story a little bit. And so even though I was still scared about getting a surprise bill in the mail, one thing that I started robotically affirming to myself just to chill myself out was, my mailbox is my friend. My mailbox is my friend. My mailbox is my friend. My mailbox brings me gifts. My mailbox brings me gifts. And I also affirmed that everything works out for me. Everything works out for me. Everything works out for me. So I had these like 3 robotic affirmations that I would practice every single time I went to my mailbox once I became aware of the fact that I was treating my mailbox from a fear-based perspective. Like, I was scared of my mailbox. And the craziest thing happened. Not only did I start self-soothing myself every time I went to the mailbox, but an incredible thing started happening. I stopped receiving surprise bills. And not only did I stop receiving surprise bills, but I also started receiving like random gifts within a week of me just changing the story through robotic affirming and using that repetitive nature of robotic affirmations to chill out. In fact, within just a week and a half of me affirming this, I got a $150 check in the mail, 2 Amazon gift cards, and then I got $200 cash, all within the same month of me just like affirming this new story, and not one single surprise bill or surprise fee that I needed to pay. In fact, I actually did get a couple suspicious envelopes, and I opened them up and they said like, oh yeah, you have to pay a fee, blah, blah, blah. And so I actually called my dad and I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, what do I need to pay a fee for this time? And he's like, oh, those are like total fraud. Like, you don't need to pay those ones specifically. It was actually a little freaky because these spam letters looked very official. They looked very similar to the actual tax documents that I get for my LLC. And so it was just very interesting to see how quickly things can change when you start focusing on what you actually do prefer rather than what you don't prefer. But the point I want to make with this video is that your ability to find higher levels of security with your manifestation is actually like the secret sauce of seeing faster reflections within your physical reality, because you're no longer selecting the old reality without your manifestation because you're having a high level of attachment or fear-based response to it. And instead, when you turn that knob of insecurity to security, you're able to quite literally take your attention off of what you do not prefer and put it on what you do prefer. And if you're someone who practices robotic affirming, I want to offer you these 4 specific ways of using robotic affirmations to shift to higher levels of security with this particular process itself. The higher level of security that you're able to find within yourself, the faster the reflection will project in your physical reality, because you're no longer selecting what you do not prefer by accident. All right. So I'm going to end the video here. Definitely let me know what you think about the video in the comments below. As always, I love hearing everyone's different perspectives, but that's all for now. Until next time, keep creating, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.